Is this the right one for an argument?
I've told you once.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have.
When?
Just now.
If you're a Monty Python fan, you might recognise that sketch. New Zealanders aren't so keen on taking their arguments to the next level. We're not a litigious bunch, or at least we didn't used to be.
I'm very sorry, but I told you I'm not allowed to argue unless you pay.
Oh, all right. There you are.
Thank you.
Well?
Well, what?
That was never 5 minutes just
I
now.
told you I'm not allowed to argue unless you pay.
I just paid.
No, you didn't.
I did! I did!
For a start, taking people or companies to court is expensive. But it seems that as our big corporations get bigger, their legal actions are becoming more frequent and more aggressive. Think Kiwi toy business Zuru taking a fight all the way to a US court to discover the identities of anonymous former employees who made the company sound like a horrible place to work.
The court ruled in favour of the toy company giant because, under New Zealand law, the company had an argument to at least plead its case for defamation.
And a Trade Me case, which we're going to look at today on The Detail. Hi, I'm Alexia Russell. What happens when Goliaths take on Davids in an effort to clear the playing field for themselves? Does our litigation legislation need to be looked at to make sure the smaller companies, the Davids, have a shot? We'll speak to a litigation expert, Justin Graham, about dealing with that threatening legal letter.
Well, often you just have to sort of work out how strongly you feel about it, how easy it is for you to change, what's economically the best path for you to fight, to fold, to do something in the middle, and that can be part of the advice that you take on how good a case you have to resist. And sometimes it's easier to avoid the fight, and I can understand why companies do that.
And we'll hear from one of those little guys, the owner of a family business that's about to be run over by a trading juggernaut and is bleeding money trying to fight it off.
And in reality, how many colours can they own?
We'll talk to Colleen Getley about the colour orange and the keywords trade and jobs later in the podcast. But first, Chapman Tripp partner Justin Graham, who's always in the mood for an argument. He oversees the company's 80-strong litigation department and is seeing increasing levels of legal action being taken.
It's hard to get accurate statistics on it, but I think just from the levels of busyness in our high courts across the country, you can see that there probably is a bit of an uptick in litigation. So in the High Court at the moment, if you file a legal proceeding, it's probably at least 2 years before you can get a trial, and that is probably the longest it's been for a while. If you just want a one-day argument in the High Court at the moment, you're looking at next year. They just don't have any time, and I think that suggests that there's quite a lot of litigation on the books.
Wow, that's not speedy justice, is it?
It's not. The High Court is very, very good, but they're just jammed, and that's true across the country really. Probably slightly less so in Wellington, I think, but Auckland and Christchurch are both the courts are clogged.
What sort of litigation are we seeing? Because we're sort of used to US firms coming in here and saying, stop doing this. You know, we've seen that with Popeyes and Fielding recently, a little takeaway shop being told to cease and desist, even though they don't even sell the same product.
There's absolutely no denying that the hype around the launch of Popeye's chicken in New Zealand is real. But is it warranted? The hard and fast answer is hell yeah.
That's one aspect of it, but there's a lot happening inside New Zealand.
Yes, there is, and it's really across the board, I think. So we have some data on sort of how much litigation there is going on in New Zealand. So, for example, our banks, they probably have a lot of litigation going on in any given year, between sort of 40 to 90 cases that they might be involved in, and they'll span everything from minor debt collection, which will make up a lot of that, to where the banks are being sued or whether there's a class action against banks over fees or something like that.
Right, so it's litigation that goes both ways.
Yes, yeah. I think there's an uptick both ways.
Any idea, you know, when you're dealing with people involved, what is behind it?
It's difficult to say. I can speculate there are probably a couple of things. One is that it's tough times, and so people are probably a bit more desperate and so turn to litigation as a last resort, and probably a bit more readily than perhaps we're used to in New Zealand. people are issuing cases more than they used to. But I don't think we quite have reached that American stage of you sue over absolutely anything. But I think people are probably just a little bit more impatient, and that's probably been driven through the aftermath of COVID, and an economic downturn has probably led to people just not exactly being trigger happy, but probably seeing litigation as an option more than they might otherwise. And perhaps that people just aren't as scared of litigation as they used to be. It's sort of become a bit more part of the New Zealand lifestyle than it ever has previously. It used to be a very big deal back in the day to take someone to court, and I think companies and people do it a little bit more readily. And probably the emergence of litigation funders has changed that as well.
Mr. Simpson, the state bar forbids me from promising you a big cash settlement. But just between you and me, I promise you a big cash settlement. My fee is 50%.
Explain litigation funding to me, because it's not something that used to happen here.
That's right. So we've never really had, and still really don't have, a class action regime in New Zealand. So litigation funding can be really helpful for people who have suffered a similar problem, who might not have the funding to be able to take someone on themselves, but can band together and with the help of a litigation funder can bring litigation. And so when we say litigation funding, it could be a group of people who have all purchased a product and the product doesn't work. And so a litigation funder says, well, I will pay your legal fees to take this claim to court, and when you win, I will take a cut.
So is this a good thing? Because I guess it's primarily used by the little guy.
Yeah, what it does do is it opens up access to justice to people who otherwise might not be able to afford to pay a lawyer and go to the High Court, even if they have a good claim, because litigation's expensive and legal fees can mount up in litigation. So not everyone's able to afford it, but if you can get your claim funded, then you don't have to worry about that.
Why is it so expensive? Is there a lot of sort of discovery, a lot of kind of procedural stuff going on? What's going on there?
Yeah, civil litigation has a number of stages to it. There's sort of the opening stages, and then you mentioned discovery, which is probably one of the longest and most expensive parts of litigation, which is where you have to turn over all the information you have that's relevant to a claim, and the other side has to do it too. And now that everything's electronic, there's a lot more stuff than there used to be. So when I started out as a lawyer, discovery was easy because you grabbed your file off the shelf and that was your discovery. But now there can be sort of terabytes of data that you have to sift through to try and find the relevant emails and invoices and things like that. And that's just time consuming. And there are a lot of initiatives to try and make it more affordable, but it's just a much bigger task than it used to be, and it takes a long time.
Print out those emails and put them in a filing cabinet.
If only, yes.
There's one going on in New Zealand, one going on at the moment, Trade Me Jobs versus Trade Jobs. You au fait with that one? This is where little enterprise set up, called itself Trade Jobs, wanting to help tradies out basically, and then Trade Me Jobs came in with a cease and desist. What's going on there?
Trade Me will have a number of trademark registrations for its intellectual property, which will include the name of the site, the name of its sub-sites. So probably, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it has Trade Me and Trade Me Jobs registered as trademarks in New Zealand. And so someone who starts up a site called Trade Jobs will take 2/3 of the words that have been registered by Trade Me. And so in that situation, Trade Me will say, well, you had all the words in the English language to choose from to advertise your site, and you chose 2 of the 3 that we use, so why did you do that? And so I can understand why they've sent a cease. They're the best words, yeah. But Trade Me's like, well, we've got in first and we've registered them, and you could have done a search and you could have found that out.
Is that kind of fuzzy though? Because, if you sell a product, you want to have a title that says, we sell this product.
Yes, so it's one of the classic issues in trademark law is anything you register should be distinctive. But obviously the closest to the word that everybody uses for your product is what you want to register. And so the counter-argument to Trade Me in that situation could be, well, trade and jobs are both very descriptive words. Why can't we use them?
Why should I change 3 generic, English words that really explain what we do?
Recruitment expert Colleen Getley spent $200,000 so far fighting off demands from Trade Me that she changes her company's name and stops using the colour orange on her marketing.
That's a $200K that we could have in our business, thank you. Setting up a business like ours is not a cheap exercise. We didn't go into this lightly. We certainly didn't go in, thinking all was going to be roses. We knew that we would be making a loss in the first year or two. And this is a significant impact in a small family business that is out there really to provide a solution to these trade businesses that were unable to find their staff, utilising the processes or the platforms, the job sites they were using already.
She started the business in 2021 when international recruiting all but disappeared during COVID. At the same time, her tradie son-in-law was looking for work and was frustrated by the paperwork needed on traditional job platforms. She found a way around it by developing an easy-to-use system specifically for the trades. At that point, similarities with internet marketplace website Trade Me were far from Colleen's thinking.
We didn't really consider it because the name of what we do is for the trades.
So it's a very generic word.
It's a very generic word,
jobs.
Trade Jobs NZ. So what do we do? We're here for the trades industry in New Zealand. We only work with trade jobs. So and New Zealand, we one of the other differences, I guess, one of the things that we wanted to ensure that we were providing a solution for was New Zealanders and being able to reach the New Zealand region. So Trade Jobs NZ.
Well, it sounds so simple.
Yes.
Until you got a letter.
We actually got served, when we launched our site in August 2021 and about April 2022, a letter actually came in through our customer service channel where I had my part-time university student monitoring it, and she said to me, "Oh, Colleen, I think there's this letter you should see." And
what did it say?
It was a cease and desist letter from Trade Me, the internal legal counsel that was at the time with the internal legal counsel sent a letter saying that they didn't like us using the colour orange, and a number of things in terms of our marketing material.
At Trade Jobs NZ, we make finding and applying for a new job simple. Like one step on your smoko break simple.
And we sent it back and say, hey, look, we really provide a completely different solution to yourself.
There was once a time when to get the right job, you needed to have worn the right school tie. But these days, with Trade Me jobs, there are opportunities galore. You can do whatever you want to do, wearing whatever tie you like.
We chose that particular orange because it is synonymous with the trades, and we did quite a lot of work in terms of our brand guidelines and brand awareness.
So like high vis.
It's
orange.
high vis. Our social media campaigns are called high vis. So high vis orange is what we use, amongst a range of other colours as well, but black and grey, and it's a combination. To be honest, didn't even cross our minds. Didn't cross our minds about the Trade Me, and it didn't really cross our minds that an orange of any type was going to be seen as passing off.
Right, or coattailing, or trying to pretend you're something you're not.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. If you actually look at most trade cones on the road, trade businesses, it is quite synonymous with the industry.
Yeah. So you get this letter, and then what did you think? Because you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either you spend a lot of money on lawyers and hope for the best, or you spend a lot of money changing your branding and reworking your social media campaigns.
Yeah, well, we actually went back and said, look, this is the reason why, and we thought that was done. And then about 6 months later, they came back to us and said, now we not only the colour orange, we want you to change your name. So that was the next step. And then again we went back and said no.
Did you have a lawyer on board by this time?
At that time we did. Yeah, well we did then. And then they came back to us with okay, we're going to start court proceedings. And then obviously having to engage lawyers who specialise in this type of process.
But Colleen's case won't be heard till May 2026, which she says is a stress hanging over her head. The courts are log-jammed. Justin Graham says there are some ways the process could be sped up.
I think we can always improve the way we do litigation in New Zealand. So it's probably the procedural rules of going to court that we can look at tweaking as much as anything. And so the courts are really good at looking at their rules of procedure and if they can be changed. And there's a proposal at the moment to look at sort of trying to front load those stages so that there's more to do when you file your claim, but then potentially it can be brought to trial more quickly. So that's something that's being looked at the moment and could have a lot of value. So it will mean that litigation is potentially more expensive up front, but the trade-off could be that you get your claim determined more quickly.
Why don't we have a robust system of mediation here?
What we don't have, I think, is compulsory mediation in New Zealand. So you file a claim, mediation's always a voluntary process. I mean, a number of cases in the High Court do go to mediation because it's quicker than waiting 2 years, and it gives you certainty as well compared to all the costs and uncertainty that goes with putting your case in the hands of a judge. So mediation, we do a lot of it. It's probably not quite as routine as it was when I started practice. Almost every case I was involved in would go to mediation.
Also, people are more trigger happy now. They'd rather just go straight to court.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it. It's not sort of exponential, but I think it is a bit incremental that we're probably seeing just slightly less use of mediation. But there are some really, really good mediators in New Zealand who do a fantastic job, and it's always a really worthwhile thing to explore if you're involved in litigation and someone suggests, hey, maybe we should have a mediation. It's a voluntary process, but it can be really, really effective.
How many people do you reckon just go and knock on that person's door and say, hey, look, there's a clash here. Would you consider changing your name? Anyone?
Yeah, it's something we've sort of remarked on ourselves that we've probably there's more of a paper trail than there used to be. In the old days, you'd potentially ring up the lawyer on the other side and say, can we have a talk about how we might settle this? And I think just with litigation becoming longer, bigger, more expensive, we don't do that quite as much as we used to, but there's still a time and a place for it.
Do you see an end to this era where people do leap to their lawyers and head through the courts first before trying to, sort of sort out a reasonable compromise?
Yes, potentially. And, an economic upturn is probably good for that, where people are not as desperate as they perhaps might be and trying to enforce their rights at the moment. That would probably help. The reform to litigation procedure, I think, might help that as well. So if it actually costs a lot more to start a case, that might make people think twice and pick up the phone more to try and sort things out first. So it's possible. At the moment, I think the current trend will continue for a little while, though.
If you work in a large organisation and decide that you don't like whatever is happening over there, $20,000 is nothing for a month. For us, it makes for sleepless nights.
It's a big undertaking to see litigation through. So if you're going to wait 2 years to have your claim resolved, there's a lot of water under that bridge, a lot of legal fees. Of course, the fact that it's 2 years means that there's a lot of opportunities along the way to try and sort things out. And so, a lot of litigation settles, of course. Not everything goes to trial. When I started out, it was something like 90% of cases would settle. I expect it's probably slightly less than that now.
Colin Getley is determined to see their litigation through to the end.
Absolutely, and I'm actually determined more for every small business in New Zealand who starts up to do something for our society. We're here specifically identifying a need. I could see my client in the trade tearing her hair out, small business, cannot find a floor sander, and I have my son-in-law saying, where do I go to, apart from going through to recruitment agencies, and a lot of the good jobs aren't listed with an agency. So we're here really, if, for example, we lose, what does that say for small businesses in New Zealand? You can't use a name that describes what you do. So we're just going to be stamped out by these large conglomerates with lots of money to spend. In reality, whatever it's costing them is a rounding off. If you were a small business and another small business you felt was infringing, the Kiwi way is to say, hey mate, can we sit down and talk about this? Right? Yeah. Not get served a cease and desist letter. That was scaring tactics, I felt.
And Justin Graham has some advice for new ventures to avoid getting one of those scary letters.
You can do it all online. It's pretty easy to go to the Intellectual Property Office website and search for existing trademarks. And then as part of establishing your own company, you can look at registering your own trademark for your trading name, making sure that you register the web domain that you wish to use, and some defensive registrations as well. So you might use .co.nz, but you'd also register .net.nz as well, even though you weren't using that, just so that someone couldn't come in and be as close to you as possible.
And sometimes those expenses, those little things that add up, paying for a domain name every year, they're sort of, if you're just a bit on struggle street and you're starting out, they're things that sort of fall off the back end, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, that's right, and it's probably something that you may not be able to do straight away, but if you have it on your list for when the business is up and running and making a bit of money to revisit it, that's a good idea. Cheaper
than changing all your letterhead, I suppose.
It is, yes, that's right.
That's it for today. The Detail is supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by Ben Pearce and produced by Phil Vine and Davina Zimmer. Thanks to Colin Getley and Justin Graham. I'm Alexia Russell. Mā te wā.